Senator Bernard Sanders coming at you today from the wonderful state of Vermont to talk to you about the state of the retro gaming community today here in America, which I find absolutely unacceptable. We have seen price increases from 700 to 1200% on Nintendo and Super Nintendo games in our communities, which should not be allowed. The upper 1% of the retro gaming community and reselling community control 95% of the rare to uncommon games for those said systems, which need to be absolutely redistributed. There are 20 million people sleeping on the streets right now that cannot afford a good shooter like Gunnak or Zombie Nation. Neither of these games should be going for the prices that they are. 5 years ago, I remember Gunnak being in the $15 bin and should not be going for upwards of $200 to $250 on a buy it now on eBay. I find that to be absolutely repulsive. The glamorization of these blockbuster exclusive games must end here and now. I am saying that a Flintstone surprise at Dinosaur Peak should not be going for $1,000 just because you think that it was an exclusive game to Blockbuster, which it never was proven that it was, when there are plenty in circulation and it's a mediocre platformer at best. Good games like Little Samson, which is the biggest culprit here, and I say to you today, Little Samson was a $75 game, which is what it should be at. It should not be an over-glamorized trophy piece of being over $1,500 for a buy it now on eBay that all these upper 1% collectors have. Nobody should ever have more than one copy of Little Samson. There's plenty of times I'm at conventions and I see that there are resellers there with not one, but 5 to 10 Little Samsons and 12 copies of Surprise at Dinosaur Peak in their cases for upwards of $900 to $1,200 each. I say today that ends. Day one that I am elected, I will bring down the upper echelon of rare Nintendo and Super Nintendo games down to a fair price so the average working American video game collector can afford them and have them respectively in their collections. We have seen price increases, especially on the Super Nintendo, that are absolutely outrageous. Games, fantastic games that were created. There are many copies out there, like Demon's Crest, wonderful platformers made by Capcom that should not be going for 10 times their normal rate. Never in my 47 years of retro game collecting did I ever think that retro game prices would affect the Sega Genesis. And now you have games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Hyperstone Heist, which in itself is a mediocre version of Turtles in Time, going for upwards of $75 loose. If you want to talk about the Sega Genesis, we'll talk about many of the fantastic games on there that people never talk about. The Strike trilogy of Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, and Urban Strike is superior on the Sega Genesis to the Super Nintendo, and I say day one that I am elected, all people that are serving in the military of this great country will receive the Strike trilogy for absolutely free. Side-scrolling side-scrolling troopers. Keep your opinions to yourself over there. Wonderful side-scrolling shooters on the Genesis, such as Contra Hardcore and Gunstar Heroes, should not be going for upwards of over $100 loose. These are both fantastic games that any respectable Sega Genesis collector should own, and I will make sure that anyone that is a Sega Genesis collector in this country will be able to afford them at a decent price. And you want to talk about the TurboGrafx 16? Let's talk about the TurboGrafx 16. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, the distribution that NEC used was unacceptable in that it was only distributed to stores on the East and West Coast. We will take all TurboGrafx Hue cards and CDs and redistribute them throughout the country so hard-working collectors in the Midwest can get them for a decent price without having to go through eBay resellers that are selling them for at least 25 to 40 times of their value. I understand that everybody wants to own a Magical Chase, which is simply not possible. But if you want a wonderful shooter on the TurboGrafx 16, I promise every single TurboGrafx owner and collector will receive a copy of Blazing Lasers, since that is the best shooter on the system. I can't even do this. Oh my god. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life?